Good morning, everyone. We're going to give this just about another 30 seconds and then we'll kick it off. We're admitting a few more people. Good morning. This is Dwayne Jasper with Travel Leaders Destinations Unlimited. We welcome you to our session here this morning and hope that everyone is safe and doing well. I'm joined by Sandy Sabalka, Vice President of Corporate Operations, and Daniel Gladish, Manager of our Sales Department. And we're thankful that you could join us for a few minutes here today. few housekeeping things. One is at the end of the presentation, we'll let you know if you want a copy of this presentation, we will make that available to you. We'll tell you how you can get that. We'll also share our email addresses at that time. So a little bit of an update on what's happening here. We are open for business, albeit not a lot of business, but we are open for business. Our staff primarily are working from home, responding to emails, to voicemails, handling stadium cards in 4 minutes, handling a lot of refunds and exchanges, and doing a lot of that kind of activity right now. We are beginning to see a little bit of a ramp in business. Last week, we made somewhere between 30 and 40 bookings, which is a very small number relative to what our normal capacity would be, our normal numbers would be, but up significantly from where it was just a couple of weeks ago. So I think we're at the very beginning of a ramp. And, we know that for all of your companies, this time that we're in is one that cannot be sustained for a long period of time. That travel is essential to getting back to your customers and really changing kind of the revenue of your company. So we want to be here to support that. And what we're hoping today is that we can discuss a few things that will get you thinking about what else your organization can do to be ready for that ramp. Talking about travel policies, talking about really getting ready to be prepared to answer some questions. Questions like, what will you do if? We all hope that things will be under control, but should we start traveling again in the near future and there is an outbreak, what will you do if some of your travelers have been to hotspots? How will you know if your travelers have been to hotspots, or how will you know if travelers are scheduled to travel to hotspots so that you can control that? So I think we want to help better prepare you for those questions. We do know that this time for sure is different. Many times the travel industry benchmarks against what happened at 9/11. Certainly, one of the more difficult times in this nation's history. But relative to 9/11, what we're seeing here is something that's much more significant in terms of the impact that it's having on the travel industry. A few weeks ago, it was reported that they estimated the impact would be 20 times or 14 times what the impact on the industry was in for 9/11. And we know that I jumped ahead here a slide. I'm going to try to move back. Hold on one second. There we go. We know the impact was about 14 times what it was for 9/11, and I think the more recent projections are that it's going to be somewhere between 20 and 25 times the impact of 9/11. So it's significant, and I think what's different about this versus 9/11 is that this is a lingering event. 9/11 was horrific. But it all happened in a matter of just a few hours when we experienced that tragedy. Certainly, we grieved for a period of time, but then we came together as a country, and really there was a sense of nationalism, and that's really lacking right now. There is no sense of nationalism. There is no sense of coming together in the same way that we experienced then. In fact, we're not even supposed to hug or share or shake hands right now. So it's completely different, and so we're all preparing for that and feeling the effects of that. And the effects of COVID-19 are staggering. And I'm going to have Sandy just talk a little bit about what we've been doing really since about the first part of March to assist a number of you.
Thank you, Dwayne. So we had kind of a three-stage process for this. One is the immediate response, which was looking at all active reservations, who's out there, when are they flying, what do we need to do? So that meant we were tracking just about 7,500 active flight segments between kind of the end of February and towards the end of July. And we are still tracking those because obviously We have people with reservations scheduled beyond this point. So we were very active in trying to make sure we understood what was out there, as well as canceling the space so that we wouldn't lose the revenue of the ticket. Step two, or stage two for us, was more about looking at what flights didn't go, what flights were canceled so that we could process refunds on your behalf, and what was still flying even though there may not have been a single person on that flight. If the airline was operating, they considered that a flight you could have taken. What that equated for us is so far almost up over $400,000 in refunds that we have processed with the different airlines for our entire agency. So quite a bit of activity there, making sure we're tracking that. And finally, stage three is kind of moving out of the reactionary process and into moving forward and looking at the future with those unused tickets. We are currently on file, have over 2,000 unused tickets that we are managing on your behalf. And what we're going to be doing is working this week to get you kind of more detailed reporting of those refunds, where they went to, what credit cards they landed on, who got those refunds. So internally you can begin processes if you need to go to travelers that were reimbursed to their personal cards, that they're now getting the refund. So you will be receiving from me a message with that information and how the procedures moving forward will happen.
Thanks, Sandy. We know that in very near order, very near term, that all of you will have some decisions to make about when is it safe to get back on the road, when is it viable to get back on the road and start traveling again. And we think those decisions are going to be fairly complex because in many cases, I think we're dealing with the human psyche here, and when do I feel safe as a traveler getting back on the road, and how do you balance health considerations and economic concerns for your company. So many complex decisions that need to be made. But we think it's important at this time to make sure to demonstrate to our employees and to travelers that there is a plan in place, that we do have their best interests in mind, and the company's best interests in mind, and we're trying to really carefully balance that. So our role in all of this, as you begin to do that, is to support you with any information you need, with communication that you need for your travelers. We really do want you to lean on us during this time, and I think we can be a good advocate in terms of helping you with that education. You know, business will return to normal at some point, but not yet. When travelers do get on the road, there are going to be many things that are going to be different going forward, at least for the near term. A number of hotel properties are still going to be closed. Places that your travelers may have frequented in the past, or if they're not closed, they're going to have limited capacity until this all gets figured out. Airline capacity is one certainly that we know is changing. I every day look at all of the regional airports and flight status and flight schedules, and if you've done that, you'll see that the number of flights traveling out of your airport has diminished significantly. And even those flights that are scheduled, a number of times they are canceled just due to lack of travelers at this point. But one of the things that we want to do, and in fact, you should be receiving a message from us by end of day tomorrow, is we've asked the Cedar Rapids Airport to join us for a webinar next week, next Tuesday at this time, to talk a little bit more about what airports are going to be doing in response to COVID and trying to create customer confidence and just educate the marketplace. So be on the lookout for that invite in the upcoming 24 hours or so. But we know it's going to be significantly different, that travel is going to take longer because I may be on a flight that gets canceled and I've now got to search for a new flight. And especially when you're traveling from a regional airport, that could be more challenging for sure. And in some cases, some travel just may not be warranted right now. Some air travel, traveling internationally, for the next few weeks, few months, may be difficult and just not a good idea. So again, we'll hear more about some of that from the airports. So be on the lookout for that. But we also know it's going to be a big change for employees. Not all will feel comfortable traveling. And so we want to take measured steps to educate travelers and let them know that we all have their best interest in mind. And again, I think education and communication is a big part of this. And I think the employees are counting on you. Hopefully you're counting on us to help you get through this and just let us know how we can be helpful. Suppliers are making great strides, changing a lot of policies, a lot of practices around health-related concerns and sanitizing. And we've got access to some of that information that we'd be happy to help you with some of your communication as we go through this. And, travelers are beginning to think about getting back on the road. I think that's evident. There's been a number of surveys that have been done by different organizations recently. We completed 2 surveys, one to travelers, just asking them about their plans to get back on the road. This survey was done in April. About 30% indicated, about a third indicated that they plan to get back on the road in May or June. That's pretty consistent with what we're hearing from other surveys. 2/3 indicated that they'd be traveling sometime between now and the end of September. GBTA did a similar survey in the month of April also, and their results were that nearly 60% of the travelers anticipated traveling sometime in May, June, or July for their first business trip. So that's coming upon us very quickly. There are still some people that are going to be fearful of traveling. A third said they're not fearful of traveling at all, a little bit more than a third. But some are going to be very fearful of traveling, and we've got to be aware of that. They're fearful of not only catching the virus, but of catching it and spreading the virus to family members. Some are fearful of just being quarantined should they travel to a hotspot or travel to a spot where maybe a hotspot is going to be identified in the future. So we need to be aware of that as we're making plans. The second survey we did was to travel managers, just asking them about what they need to do on their side to be prepared for this ramp. And 57% indicated that it's going to be more important now than ever to know where their travelers are going or where they've been. Knowing where they've been in case a hotspot breaks out, how do you address that? 36% indicated that they need to update their travel policies and make some changes, at least in the near term. We'll spend some more time on that in a little bit. In fact, Daniel's going to talk a little bit about travel policies now. So if travelers are starting to think about travel, we need to make sure we're out in front of that with our policies and our communication. Daniel?
Thanks, Dwayne. So yeah, I'm going to talk a bit about why reviewing our travel policies is so important at this time. We all know that the world has changed and it's going to affect how we travel for the foreseeable future. So we're going to need to adapt. We're going to need to make some changes and prepare for this different travel experience. So as Dwayne mentioned in the survey, 30-some% of travel managers believe that it's very important to update their travel policies at this time. And we see that number increasing over the next several weeks and several months as travel slowly starts to pick up. Because, we have company leadership asking, what are we doing about travel? What should we be doing about travel? So it's going to be more and more important that we have answers to those questions. So where should we really start with reviewing our travel policies? Well, we want to come at this with a certain mental framework. We want to be asking simply, is our travel policy relevant now? Is it up to date? Because we are operating in a new environment. And we also want to ask ourselves, does our travel policy, does it convey to our travelers that we do value their health and safety? As Dwayne mentioned, there is a psychological effect to getting folks back on the road. They want to be sure that their companies and their TMCs have the right information and are guiding them in the right ways. So that's another one. And then finally, does the travel policy empower us as a company to assist our travelers? And does it also empower us to protect our non-travelers? So that's kind of the framework we want to take when we look at the travel policy, but some concrete steps we can take. There are many of them, but I'm just going to mention a few so we can help you get started. But number one is we need to really address on-the-grid travel. And by that, I mean having all travel booked through the travel management company. It's more important than ever. As Dwayne touched on, we need to know where folks have booked travel to, and we need to know where they have been. So that's going to be very important. So from a health and safety perspective, we need on-the-grid travel, and really from a financial perspective as well. This has taken economic toll on many companies, and having on-the-grid travel is a way to make sure that your travelers are getting the best rates going forward. So we need to be doing that. We also need to be updating our travelers on supplier policy changes, both as far as cleanliness standards are concerned, as well as procedural, because it's going to be a different experience when folks get back out on the road. And Sandy's going to touch on all of this a bit later in the presentation. Then also duty of care. We want to reiterate in our travel policies what that is and why it's so important. As companies, we have an obligation to our travelers to care for them while they're out on the road. So we want to make sure they know, in order for us to do that, we need to have them adhere to the policies. And then finally, travel risk management. We need to ask ourselves, can we effectively manage travel risks? And if not, maybe we need to partner with a third party. Maybe we need medical evacuation services. Maybe we need Western standard medical care overseas, or maybe we need an online travel risk management solution. We offer one such solution. It is called CARE, and basically what it does is it allows travel managers to warn travelers pre and during travel if they booked travel to, say, a COVID-19 hotspot. It allows travelers and travel managers to communicate during travel if they need to work through a situation. And finally, it allows travel managers to pull post-travel data. We may need some folks self-quarantining at home before they come back into the office. So, if you're looking at solutions like this, you want to make sure that the information that you're looking at is related to epidemics. That's very important, of course, in the future. We want to make sure that the information is granular enough to be useful. Statewide and regional information probably won't be as helpful as city level information. And finally, just the ability to pull that pre and post travel information is going to be vital going forward. So lots to think about right now. We do recommend reviewing their travel policies so that you're prepared for the future here. And of course, lean on us to help you in that regard. And with that, I will hand it back over to Dwayne.
Thanks, Daniel. As we mentioned, 36% of travel managers believe that they need to update their travel policy. And I would argue that 100% of us do, at least for the short term, and consider some of the following in your travel policy or in your communications. Are there certain areas where you're not going to allow people to travel? Is international travel recommended by your company at this time? Travel to maybe hotspots or where spots where infection rates were higher? Are those places that for some period of time we may want to avoid? Other things, we're all big fans of Uber and Lyft, and we use them frequently. But is this the appropriate time to be doing that, or is it better and safer to be considering a rental car where you're going to be the only person in that car versus multiple people going in and out all day long? So is it time to, at least for the short term, think about that differently? The use of your online booking tool in delivering communication to travelers, things that you want them to be aware of. These could be messages that are ongoing for the next 30, 60, 90 days that we need to constantly update as it relates to changes in how you and how the industry is feeling about travel. It's a good time to evaluate your meeting policies, internal and external meetings. What are you going to do for trade shows and conferences for the next couple of quarters? Are you going to attend? Are you not going to attend? I think making all of those decisions is going to be important. Understanding your company's health benefits, especially if people are traveling overseas. What's covered? How are they covered in the case of some kind of a medical emergency? We want to make sure that we're fully aware of those things. And then obviously there's a lot of resources that are available that we've all heard a lot about, from social distancing to washing our hands frequently. But I think it's important now to make sure that that's also in our travel policy or in our communication. Again, it's another step that we can all take to make sure that that the employees know that we're thinking about them and caring about them. And also, do you need to think about some of your expense policies? Is this a time to be thinking about if employees need to purchase masks or hand sanitizer if they're traveling or in the office? Are those now reimbursable expenses where that they probably weren't part of your policy in the past? So definitely some things that we need to be thinking about. Airlines, we're all reading stories about some things that are happening at hotels and airlines, but I'm going to have Sandy talk just a little bit about, what's happening with various suppliers and industries to help make it safer for people to travel in the future.
As Dwayne touched upon earlier, we're going to start seeing inventory and capacity continue to shrink as the airline, the hotel industries, and the car industries are adjusting to fewer travelers being in their planes, their cars, and in their hotels. You're going to see different markets change with the airlines not flying to certain markets, especially those secondary and tertiary markets where maybe they just don't have enough volume to begin with to be carrying 1 or 2 passengers. We're going to probably see more connection flights than we are, nonstops from those markets. We already kind of struggle with that in the secondary market. The international, some of that is going to be dictated by the country itself. Some of that is going to be dictated by the airlines at that. We are already seeing, obviously, capacity shrinking. Certain plane types are being taken out of commission. They're just not efficient. So we're going to be doing that. Another big piece that's going to affect your travelers is getting through the airport itself. So when you have TSA screenings that are going to be happening, they're going to be enhanced. You're going to have airlines with their own policies. You're seeing the major airlines with JetBlue starting out requiring masks. So what happens when your traveler arrives at the airport and he doesn't have a mask? So you really need to be thinking about helping them, get their way through that process. The TSA has a great website. If you go out to tsa.gov/coronavirus, you can see some of that information and what they're doing, what they're reporting for COVID cases and things of that nature. You're seeing airlines change some of their seating policies to block middle seats or to offer the ability to purchase a more space seat in the case of Frontier. Again, that's going to affect your travel policy. Are you going to be covering those kind of things? With regards to suppliers, as Dwayne mentioned, we've got a lot of hotels that are closed. You are seeing staff furloughed. You are seeing staff let go altogether because they don't have the business to support, which means you're going to have more things going on. I think what will happen is you're going to see the flow of the sanitation or the clean guidelines that are going to happen in order to protect these industries. So airlines don't want to have another COVID outbreak and be a part of spreading that. The hotels don't want to be a part of that problem. They want to be a part of the solution. So we're seeing in countries like Singapore has instituted a new SG Clean guideline where hotels have to work through 7 categories and they get certified. We're seeing challenges with the Airbnb industry and the fact that some of these people aren't making enough money to pay the mortgage. So you're going to see that shrink drastically. But again, are you staying in somewhere that is safe, is secure, not just from a personal security, but from a health security standpoint? So hotels are facing the same challenges. We're seeing mobile check-ins, virtual payments. With car rental companies, you are seeing that they are kind of, I think, a little bit ahead of the game here because they have been operating to support first responders. So they are already putting in place clean policies to ensure the vehicle itself is cleaned each time and that those first responders are really safe for anybody else who's getting in that vehicle. So we're asking you to kind of think a little differently about your travel program than maybe you have in the past. In the past, it's been book online, book online, book online because it's going to be less expensive. Well, now you have a lot of unused tickets that need to be reused. You don't want that revenue, that value to go to waste. Now you're also having to say, okay, find the least expensive place. Do you want them on a public transportation? Do you want them in a Lyft or an Uber? So you're going to have to think about that as well. So I think the car rental companies have got a little bit of a head start on some of that for them.
Okay, so as we've mentioned now a couple of times, certainly unprecedented times, uncharted waters for sure that we're in right now, and we know that all of you are starting to think about what's next. When do travelers get on the road? When is it going to be safe? And how do you balance that again with the economic concerns of your company? And so as you're preparing for that, we really believe now is the time. Now is the time to make sure that we are looking at all travel policies. And again, some of this may be a short-term adjustment versus a long-term, but to make sure that we've got the right items in place, to make sure that we are educating our travelers and communicating with them frequently about the right steps to take. We have discussions with most of you during all of our account management meetings about getting travel on the grid. There's lots of reasons for doing that, but it's more important now than ever to know where your travelers have been and where they're going, so that you have some insight in, in an automated way, can really track what's going on with your travel program. And again, you want to do that not just for the travelers, but for the people that aren't traveling. You owe it to them right now too. So if you have questions about any of this, or if you'd like a copy of this presentation, you can email any one of us three. We'd be happy to send that across. We're also doing frequent newsletters to travelers, frequent newsletters to travel managers. If you're not on that distribution list, we would encourage you, again, send one of us an email message, and we'll make sure that we get you added. The other takeaway that we want you to know, again, is while we're kind of in a work from home environment today, while our company is in that mode, we will be ready when you're ready. We are making plans to get back to work. It'll again be a slow ramp, but ultimately your needs will drive what we do here, and we'll be ready for that. But in the meantime, as you're preparing for that, feel free, like you can lean on us now too. We want to be there to help you with any communication, with any policy adjustments that need to be made. And if there are questions about refunds, exchanges, Sandy and her team have done a great job with this. The policies are changing daily in many cases, but they are staying on top of it. There's a lot of transactions and activity that's taking place, but we're absolutely doing our very best to make sure that we are your advocates in this whole thing that's going on, and just let us know how we can be helpful. Again, we thank you for your time today, and please be on the lookout for an invitation for a webinar next week, same time, with more information about what airports are going to be doing, TSA could be doing to really help our travelers in the future. So thank you, and again, hope that you are all safe. All the best to everyone. Thank you.